Hey guys, I am here with my final list in counting down my top 100 movies of the decade. This is my numbers 20 through number one movie of the decade. And it's been a long time coming, but I'm really excited to share my top 20 movies. For those of you who know me, you probably are thinking, oh, there's some movies he hasn't shared yet that I know he loves. I wonder where they're going to fall, and I'm so excited to unveil to you where they will fall. Obviously, any movie that's made my top 20 was an exceptional movie in my book, and one that I just love from this decade. And a few of these are just my favorite movies of all time, even. So it's great to be able to talk about them. Let's kick things off with number 20. At number 20, I have Gravity. This one with George Clooney and Sandra Bullock, and takes place in space. Like I said, I'm a sucker for a good sci-fi movie, and that's what this one is. This one's Alfonso Cuarón. Like I said, this guy is one of my favorite working directors. This is the highest movie I have on the list from him. And I think that the isolation is really felt in this movie. It's incredible to watch the idea of being alone in space, and it's like a horror movie in that way, just the loneliness and the drifting. But it's also really really action-packed in some ways, and it's a really interesting movie, and it falls in at number 20 on my list. At number 19, I have a movie I feel like this was underseen quite a bit, but it's one of my favorites. It's called Sing Street, and it's actually a movie that's, I believe it takes place in Ireland. And it's like, this movie takes place in the 80s, and it's basically this kid just wanting to start this band to impress a girl. But it's such a fun movie. I love watching it told through these different songs that he makes up, and they're all really good songs. If you like good music, this movie absolutely meets that. And on top of that, it's a fun love story watching these two. And then I just don't want to say too much about it. I think it's one that everyone really should watch, and everyone would really enjoy this kind of movie. So that's my number 19. At number 18, I have A Quiet Place. This one was directed by John Krasinski, and stars Emily Blunt and himself in the movie. It is one of my favorite horror movies of the decade, and it was actually my favorite movie of 2018, and it remains in that slot. I just found the idea of playing with sound and the horror with silence to be such an intriguing, inventive idea, and I love the way that this movie went about that. I think this is a thriller / horror movie that's really can be for anyone. I don't think it's limited to those people who are in the horror audience and that kind of thing. I think it's for everyone. It's a great watch. Number 17 is my actually highest animated movie on the list, and it is Pixar's Inside Out. Man, this movie, obviously gets me in the feels, and it does so really effectively. It's such a fantastic and heartfelt movie, and it's funny. It has these great characters, and it gets kids in touch with their emotions. I mean, is what it does, as well as a job as a movie, and it does so well. To make the highest Pixar movie on my list in the top 20 of the decade, it just shows how much I love this, and I adore this movie. If you haven't seen it, it's one that you have to see, and it's for everyone. It's for kids, it's for adults alike, so definitely watch Inside Out. Number 16 on my list, highest Wes Anderson movie on my list, and it's Grand Budapest Hotel. I really enjoy this movie. I think it's tons of fun, and it's directed well. It's directed incredibly well by Wes Anderson. He has that, again, kind of funny style and this symmetry. He does a great job of directing it in that way, and it just ends up being really one of the best of the decade, I think, objectively. I think a lot of people look at this as one of the top, and Of course, well acted. It's definitely a strong recommend for someone maybe who's not gotten into a lot of Wes Anderson films, wants to know what they're like. This is probably a good starting point for you to be able to see what he's about. So that comes in number 16. At number 15, I have Interstellar. I think this is the first of the Nolan movies that I have on my list, but it will not be the last. Nolan has my number, and I mean that in a way. I said Taika Waititi has my number. Nolan has my number. I mean, this guy is my favorite director, probably of all time. And Interstellar, he does something completely different than normal. His normal style, is very, I feel like, unemotional and is, driving through time in that way. But this one grabs you emotionally and really invests you. I remember watching this in theater and it just being such a beautiful spectacle too. The way it's shot and the way that he does those practical effects with the planets, it's amazing. And then there's so much that's scientifically accurate if you look into it as well, and that's what I love too about this movie is he takes time and he takes a lot of effort into his craft, and I think this does a great job, as Nolan always does, of playing with time and doing that in an interesting way. So that falls in number 15. At number 14, I have my highest ranked Rian Johnson movie of the decade. Once again, not The Last Jedi. It is Knives Out. Knives Out, what a fun whodunit. If you haven't seen this one, go out and watch it now. Stop the video, watch it right now, because Knives Out is such a great whodunit movie. It's well acted by Daniel Craig, plays this hilarious detective, Benoit Blanc. On top of that, you've got Ana de Armas. She carries this movie. It's incredible. I hadn't seen her in very much. I mean, obviously in more supporting roles, but to see her carry this movie like she does is great. Chris Evans is lots of fun. Michael Shannon he has some of the funniest lines of the whole movie in my book. And it's just an all-around good time. So definitely watch Knives Out if you haven't seen it. Number 13, what some might call my favorite movie of the decade. It's not, but that's what some might say. It's Baby Driver. So Edgar Wright has directed Baby Driver. He's directed several really great movies this decade, but this is my favorite of his. And Ansel Elgort, but the music is really what takes the center stage here, and just how he edits this movie with the music and makes it such a exciting and again a kinetic action tale of these cars and their this getaway driver. It's such a fun watch, and it's undoubtedly deserving of a top spot on my decade list. At number 12, I have a movie that came out last year, and it's another one that I loved, and it's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, directed by Quentin Tarantino. This is my highest Tarantino movie on the list. I love this movie. This is actually probably my second favorite Tarantino movie that I've seen, and I think that this one's especially well acted by Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, and some of their career best performances. And I love how Tarantino takes a look at the glory days of film in the 60s and Sharon Tate, and how he changes makes his own history. And that's kind of what Tarantino does nowadays, is he alters history, and he does so in a super fun way. But I love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it needed to be on my list, and it almost made the top 10, and really squeaking close to the top 10 at number 11. And man, this one was in my top 10, then it wasn't, and it moved around so much. It falls at number 11 in the end. It's Get Out, Jordan Peele's directorial debut. Get Out, I can't think of enough good to say about this movie. This was a jaw-dropping movie for me in the theaters. I was stunned. I thought that the way that it addressed social issues and commented on it was really brilliant and subtle. And I just love the way that Jordan Peele can make these, horror movies, but he's able to weave these fantastic symbolic tales as well into them. And this is, of course, the prime example of him doing so. I just rewatched it again recently, and again, it holds up so well. It's such a great movie, and it just falls outside my top 10. And in my top 10 now, we are starting at number 10. I have last year's 1917. Actually, I didn't see 1917 until this year because it was released in January wide. But this movie, what an incredible war movie. To watch the way that Sam Mendes directed this to look like one shot is incredible. And it's so much more than that, too, because at the start of the movie, you know, I walk in, I know it's supposed to be directed like it looks like one shot. And I start out and I'm looking for the shots, but then within 5-10 minutes, I've forgotten about that completely. And I'm just watching these two guys travel across, you know, this war-stricken country in search of this guy's brother to call off this attack. And it captivated me. This is one of the best shots in any movie I can think of. Just that scene toward the end, it was in the trailer, but running across this battlefield. It's something that you'd have to see to really understand and appreciate. But man, 1917 is a great film, and I had to put it in my top 10 of the decade because of how great it was. So that falls in number 10. At number 9, I have my highest. No, that's false. I was going to say my highest Denis Villeneuve movie, but that's not true. It's actually my second highest. It's Blade Runner 2049. Blade Runner 2049 was one of my favorite screenplays of the year because it was so original, and it took this movie, you know, Blade Runner, that I thought was fine from the 80s, but it really took the best parts of that and was able to weave those parts of the story into this other entirely different tale starring Ryan Gosling. And Blade Runner 2049 has some great themes on what it means to be human. It's a great science fiction tale, and it, again, has one of my favorite stories of the entire decade, and it falls into my top 10 because of that. At number 8, I have another Christopher Nolan movie. This time, it is Dunkirk. So obviously that's a couple war movies I've had in my top 10 now, but I think that both these do such an interesting job of having an interesting and new way to tell the story of war. And Dunkirk, in particular, does so with time. And it plays with time in a way I'd never seen in any war movie before. I mean, this is so interesting. It has, you know, this section that takes place over the course of a week, one that takes place over the course of a day, and another one that takes place over the course of an hour, and it tells them all together interchangeably. And this was one of the best watches I had in theaters. I went to an IMAX watch of this, and just the booming sound makes you feel like you're part of it. The way it's shot makes you feel like you're a part of the action always. And this is Nolan at the top of his game, you know, just to see him doing this kind of thing with this kind of movie in this time, and I just am so excited to see him continue to do stuff. So that's my number 8. My number 7 movie, it feels like a travesty for me to have this at number 7 because it's so good. It should be even higher, it feels like, but I love all these other movies even more. Number 7 is Mad Max Fury Road. This is just brilliance on screen. As far as the directing and the action, I don't think there's better action this whole decade, to be frank. I think that the action in Mad Max Fury Road is some of the best action you can see on film, and to watch it, you know, so much of it was practical and in the desert, and just the way that these cars, you know, are going and fighting with each other even, and this post-apocalyptic world. It's a fantastic watch because of that, and it's, you know, easily a top 10 movie for me this decade. It's also really competently directed by George Miller, who, you know, comes back behind the camera of Mad Max after years and years of not directing action even. You know, director of Happy Feet. So it's incredible to watch, and Mad Max Fury Road is certainly a top 10 movie of the decade for me. At number 6, this is my highest Denis Villeneuve movie. He's had several on my list, as you know, and my favorite is Arrival. Arrival stars Amy Adams, and it's essentially an alien movie, and kind of the same manner of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that Steven Spielberg movie that came out a long time ago. It's about, encountering aliens for the first time, but it's so focused on language and linguistics. And I just get chills thinking about the directions that this movie takes and turns, and how powerful it is in terms of communication, linguistics, unity, working together, and the themes that run throughout. I do think it's Denis Villeneuve's best movie that he's made, and I think it'll probably go down too as a great movie all time. At number 5, I have a Damien Chazelle movie, and my second favorite, actually, Damien Chazelle movie, and it came out in 2016, and it is La La Land. I adore La La Land. I wouldn't say I like musicals, but I wouldn't say it's like my top genre, but this one hit me in all the right ways. La La Land is just such a fun movie, and it's great story of these two and their dreams in Los Angeles, and what it looks like for them to be together but still hold on to their dreams. And ultimately, of course, it looks like following your dreams and what that's going to look like. I don't want to spoil anything for those who haven't seen it, but I think this is a movie that I could recommend to anyone, and just say this is a fun watch, and it's a really powerful movie, actually, at its core and at the end. And I think that you'll love the music no matter what, no matter who you are and where you're coming from. Number 4, this was my highest movie of 2019, and this is my highest foreign movie. It's Parasite. I knew going into this movie that was good. I didn't know what it was about, and within about 20 minutes into the movie, I thought it was going one way, and then about 45 minutes into the movie, it went somewhere completely different. And there's no way to explain the twists and turns this movie makes without just saying you need to watch it. I know subtitles are a problem for people. They don't want to watch the subtitles. Please, just, take some reading into your life. Reading's good for you. Read the subtitles and watch Parasite, because it's just an amazing movie. And it's so brilliant in its themes of class and what it looks like for kind of the poor and the rich in South Korea. And Bong Joon-ho is just at the top of his game here. It's an amazing film, and it is a high recommend from me. Number 3, I have Whiplash. That is my highest Damien Chazelle movie on this list. And Whiplash, again, we're talking in these top, 10 probably instant classics. And when I look at Whiplash, that's what I see here. Just an instantly classic movie because of how incredible it's acted, the themes, again, that run through it. It's anxiety producing, but in a good way. And you just see this abusive instructor basically taking this kid under his wing because he wants to create greatness and capture that in a bottle. And the way this movie moves, and watching the rivalry between these two, but yet the camaraderie, makes it just one of the best movies I've ever seen. I love the way that it ends as well. I think it has one of the best ending scenes of any movie in cinema, and it is my number 3. So now we're getting really down to it. My number 2 of the decade is The Social Network. This one came out in 2010, directed by David Fincher, stars Jesse Eisenberg as Mark Zuckerberg, creator of Facebook. And this is the Facebook movie. But gosh, if you had told me that I would have the Facebook movie basically at number 2 on my list before I had seen this movie, I would have thought you were absolutely insane. What could a movie about Facebook have to say that'd be relevant? And so much. It doesn't matter where Facebook goes. this movie will always be relevant because it's an incredible tale of this guy who's just basically he wants to impress people. He's got a few people in his life that he respects, who he wants to impress, but he goes to such lengths to do it. And then, of course, the way he screws over his friends in the process. I can't say enough good about this movie. I will say this is easily one of my favorite original scores of the decade. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross have been doing scores since this movie. I think it was since this movie came out. This was the first one they did together, and every time they do something, it's one of my favorite soundtracks. So that's another great positive part of this movie. But of course, Andrew Garfield, just incredible in this movie. Jesse Eisenberg is great. Armie Hammer plays two characters, and he does so flawlessly. On top of that, you've got Justin Timberlake comes into this movie. And everyone in it is just fantastic. This is easily one of my favorites of the decade, but it's not my favorite. Because my favorite movie of the decade is the movie that got me into film and made me interested in film. And I could rant and rave about this movie for hours. I love it. It's maybe my favorite movie of all time, potentially. Depends on the day, probably. But it's, again, a Christopher Nolan movie, and it's Inception. Inception. Man, this movie just is perfect to me. It's perfect. Leonardo DiCaprio, of course, acts really well in it, and the acting's great, but where it really lies is the story. And what an innovative story, what an interesting way to play with time. The idea of heisting and creating memories in people's minds. It feels insane that someone could come up with this idea, but Christopher Nolan and his brother did it, and it worked perfectly. Inception is, I think, one of the best movies that was ever made, and I think it will go down in history as that. People will be coming back to this movie for decades, probably even into the next century, I bet, to look at what Nolan did and how he created this world. And Inception, because of all of that, definitely deserves to be my number one of the decade, and is easily one of my favorites ever. So there you have it. That is my complete list, 100 to 1 of my favorite movies of the decade. I wanted to hear from you. I want to hear what your favorites of the decade are. Please let me know. If you have a top 20 like this last list here, let me know what those are. Let me know what you think of my movies, about my picks, what I said. And I was so happy to be able to share them with you. I had a great time going through them and ranking them and getting to rewatch a lot of them too. So it was a pleasure making this list. It was a great decade in movies, and I'm excited for this next decade in movies, 2020s. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.